For thousands of years, this place was nothing at all, just a damp, low-lying delta tangled with reeds and marsh grass, the last resting point where the Yangtze River, after a journey of thousands of kilometers from the western plateaus of China, finally released its heavy silt into the East China Sea. No one recorded the moment. And yet, quietly, in that wet and unremarkable ground, the story of one of the world's great cities had already begun. Archaeologists have found traces of it. At sites like Songzhe and Liangzhu, they uncovered the remains of Neolithic communities who lived along this delta 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. These were people who planted rice in the soft black soil and shaped delicate pottery vessels with a patience that still astonishes visitors standing before them today in the museums of Shanghai. They could not have known what they were doing. They were only trying to survive, to build something that might outlast a single lifetime. But without meaning to, they were planting a seed, one that would take thousands of years to bloom into one of the largest metropolises in human history. In ancient times, this land belonged to the rival river kingdoms of Wu and Yue, two civilizations that rose and clashed in the south of China. The region's old name, Hu, came from a simple bamboo fishing tool that local people used to catch fish along the rivers, a humble word for a humble life. That name never entirely disappeared. It still lingers in Shanghai's geography today, in the Suzhou Creek, sometimes called the Hu River. It is a small detail, but it tells you something important. Long before Shanghai existed as a city, its identity was already being shaped by water, by the relationship between people and rivers, between survival and current. That relationship never really ended. It simply grew, decade after decade, into the great ports and shipping canals that define the city now. For centuries, this small settlement lived in the shadow of grander cities like Suzhou, the true cultural and economic heart of the Yangtze Delta. But little by little, because of its strategic position where the river meets the sea, this modest fishing village began to grow into something more, a minor but rising port. Then, during the Song dynasty, around the 11th century, the name Shanghai appeared for the first time in official records. It meant roughly, upon the sea, a name that captured exactly what the place was, the point where a river surrenders itself to the ocean, where ships can slip from solid land into the boundless world of water. The true turning point came in 1291. Under the Mongol-ruled Yuan dynasty, the government formally elevated Shanghai to the status of a county, a xian. It sounds like a small, forgettable administrative decision, but it was the beginning of everything. Shanghai was no longer simply a cluster of fishing huts by the water. Now it had an administration, an official market, defensive walls, the bones of a real urban structure. Merchants from across the Yangtze Delta began pouring into this newly legitimized port, and without anyone quite noticing, the first seeds of a future megacity were being planted in the delta soil. Shanghai's fate during the Ming and Qing dynasties became tied to a single humble crop: cotton. The rich, moist soil of the delta was extraordinarily well suited to growing it, and the small spinning and weaving workshops around the city slowly transformed into one of the most important textile centers in all of China. Shanghai's cotton cloth, prized for its fine quality, traveled from this port across the empire and into Southeast Asia. This economic flowering was no accident. It was the direct result of Shanghai's extraordinary geography. The Huangpu River, which fed into the Yangtze, allowed ships to reach deep, safe waters without ever confronting the dangerous open sea. That rare mix of safety and access made Shanghai a natural choice for merchants seeking a port that was both calm and constantly busy. Yet through the late Qing era, Shanghai remained on paper just a provincial county. Beneath its quiet surface, an enormous commercial energy was building, waiting only for a spark to ignite it. That spark, tragically, would come out of catastrophe. In the first half of the 19th century, the British Empire, hungry for access to China's enormous market, began flooding the country with opium grown in colonial India. It was a trade that spread addiction across the land and forced the Qing government into confrontation. That confrontation became the First Opium War, from 1839 to 1842, a war China lost badly, shaking the empire to its foundations. The consequence was the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, a document that permanently altered Shanghai's destiny. Under its terms, 5 Chinese ports, Shanghai among them, were forced open to foreign trade as so-called treaty ports. From that moment on, Shanghai entered one of the strangest and most contradictory chapters of its history. The British, the French, and later the Americans carved out sections of the city as foreign concessions, zones where Chinese law simply did not apply, and foreign residents lived under the laws of their home countries instead. The city was effectively split into pieces. The old Chinese walled city with its narrow traditional lanes, the international settlement, a blend of British and American interests, and the French concession, with its European architecture and elegant cafes. This division, born from colonial humiliation, strangely became the foundation for one of the most electric eras in the city's history, an era people would later call the Paris of the East. The 1920s and 1930s can be seen as both the peak of Shanghai's glamour and the peak of its contradictions. The city rapidly became one of the largest, most crowded metropolises on Earth, a place where the legendary wealth of international merchants, sprawling European and American banks, glittering jazz clubs, and grand cinema halls along the romantic curve of the Bund existed side by side with the crushing poverty of Chinese laborers and slum-dwelling street children. Shanghai in these years hosted an astonishing population of international refugees and wanderers, white Russian traders who had fled the Bolshevik Revolution, European Jews escaping rising anti-Semitism in Germany and Austria, who found shelter in the Hongkou district, and adventurers, artists, and spies drawn to a city so lawless it offered anyone the chance to reinvent themselves. But beneath that dazzling surface lay deep political and social tension. Textile factories running on modern European machinery exploited thousands of workers under brutal conditions, and those very conditions turned Shanghai into the cradle of China's labor and communist movements. In 1921, in a modest house in the French concession, a small group of intellectuals and activists, including a young man named Mao Zedong, held the first Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. At the time, it seemed like a minor, almost invisible event, but it planted a revolutionary seed that would, 3 decades later, transform the destiny of an entire nation. Shanghai, without realizing it, was nurturing its own revolutionary future in the very same moment it was drowning in colonial luxury. That glamour did not last. With the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, the city became the site of one of the bloodiest early battles of the Second World War in Asia. During the Battle of Shanghai, Japanese forces, after 3 brutal months of street fighting, seized control of the Chinese-administered parts of the city, while the foreign concessions became a strange island of relative neutrality, a period historians call the solitary island. It could not last. With Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japanese forces seized full control of the foreign concessions as well, and Shanghai's era of semi-colonial independence came to a shattering end. The end of the war in 1945 brought no lasting peace. China's civil war between the nationalist forces of Chiang Kai-shek and the communists under Mao Zedong resumed, and Shanghai, like so many Chinese cities, became a stage for conflict and economic collapse. Finally, in 1949, communist forces entered Shanghai and took control, opening an entirely new, and in many ways painful, chapter in the city's history. With the founding of the People's Republic of China, the policies of the new communist government reshaped Shanghai's face at its very foundation. The central government, wary of the city's capitalist and colonial past, directed industrial investment mostly toward other Chinese cities, and Shanghai, despite its advanced infrastructure and skilled workforce, spent decades on the margins of national development. Many wealthy families, foreign merchants, and Shanghainese entrepreneurs left the city altogether, migrating to Hong Kong, Taiwan, or the West, carrying with them capital, knowledge, and business networks the city would spend generations rebuilding. The years of the Cultural Revolution, from 1966 to 1976, brought Shanghai, like so much of China, a period of chaos, repression, and cultural devastation. Many historic buildings, temples, and works of art were damaged or destroyed, and the city's intellectual and artistic elite faced persecution and exile. Yet even in the darkest years, Shanghai's commercial spirit, though silenced, never fully died. It was as if the city was simply waiting for a chance to breathe again. That chance finally arrived in the 1990s. Following Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms, which had begun spreading across China since the late 1970s, Shanghai initially lagged behind southern regions like Shenzhen in economic opening. But in 1990, China's central government made a historic decision. Pudong, a largely rural agricultural district across the Huangpu River, was formally designated a special economic development zone. That decision was the spark that finally woke Shanghai from its long sleep. What happened over the following 2 decades can only be described as one of the fastest, most breathtaking urban transformations in human history. Land that had been little more than rice paddies until the late 1980s became in less than 30 years a forest of skyscrapers, home to iconic towers like the Oriental Pearl Tower, the Jinmao Tower, and the Shanghai World Financial Center. Foreign investment poured back into Shanghai like a flood, but this time not as a colonial power dictating terms, but as a partner sharing in the rise of a confident, powerful new China. Pudong International Airport, the reopened Shanghai Stock Exchange, and the Port of Shanghai, which grew into the busiest container port on Earth, all became symbols of this magnificent return. Today, if you stand on the Bund and look across the river, you see 2 worlds existing side by side, in a way that feels almost impossible and yet somehow makes perfect sense. On one side, historic buildings in their Art Deco and European neoclassical styles, relics of the old Paris of the East, still stand proudly along the waterfront. On the other, the glass and steel towers of Pudong reach endlessly skyward, symbols of 21st century China's boundless ambition. This is not a coincidence. It is the very essence of Shanghai's identity. A city that never forgets where it came from, yet always keeps its eyes fixed on the farthest horizon. Shanghai today is not only China's largest city by population, but one of the world's most important centers of finance, commerce, and culture. Millions of people from across China and the world have moved here to work, study, or live, making it one of the most diverse and energetic metropolises on the planet. Traditional restaurants in old neighborhoods now breathe alongside global fashion and technology brands in a single, seamless urban fabric. Even the city's old Longtang alleyways, once threatened with total demolition, are now respectfully restored and preserved, as if Shanghai finally learned that progress does not have to mean forgetting the past. Among all the towering skyscrapers and neon-lit avenues of modern Shanghai, you can still find corners where the city's ancient soul survives. Corners that have withstood the relentless waves of modernization. Yu Garden, built in the 16th century during the Ming Dynasty by an official named Pan Yunduan for his aging father, still offers visitors a quiet pocket of another era, with its calm ponds, strangely shaped rocks, and wooden pavilions. The alleys surrounding it, lined with traditional shops and the scent of tea and spices, still carry the same atmosphere local merchants would have known hundreds of years ago. The Jade Buddha Temple, home to two white jade statues brought from Burma in the 19th century, stands as a symbol of the city's deep spiritual roots. A city that, despite all its trade, war, and revolution, never fully severed its connection to its cultural origins. This contrast between the quiet spirituality of ancient temples and the dizzying pace of modern financial markets is precisely what sets Shanghai apart from every other city on Earth. A city that has learned to live in several different centuries at once, one foot in tradition, the other stepping into the future. Perhaps no other city in China reflects the nation's rises and falls as completely as Shanghai does. When China was humiliated by foreign powers, Shanghai was the first city to feel it on its own skin. When China rose in revolution, Shanghai was its cradle. When China spent decades in economic isolation, Shanghai fell silent along with it. And when China finally opened its gates to the world and became one of the greatest economic powers on Earth, it was Shanghai that was chosen as the showcase of that transformation. This is why so many historians believe that, to truly understand the modern history of China, one must first understand Shanghai, because this city, on a smaller but more concentrated scale, mirrors everything that has happened to an entire great nation. In the end, the story of Shanghai is the story of a recurring pattern: collapse and rebirth. This city rose from fishing marshes, blossomed out of colonial humiliation in the treaty ports, burned in the flames of war, fell silent in the forced quiet of the communist decades, and finally rose again from its own ashes, taller and brighter than ever, never truly surrendering. If you stand today beside the Huangpu River and gaze at the countless lights of Pudong, you are watching thousands of years of struggle, hope, and rebuilding unfold before your eyes. The history of a city that has learned it never really dies. It is only ever reborn, again and again, each time stronger